Scatter plots are not just useful when we talk about panel data. They're also maybe primarily useful when we talk about relationships between cross-sectional variables. We're going to spend a lot of time this semester talking about cross-sectional bivariate data. So that's where we're turning in the last part of class here. So part 1.5, we're talking about bivariate data, which we've sort of already introduced with panel. But we're going to talk more systematically about how to interpret scatter plots. And then I'm going to preview some of the things that are coming in part 2. So let's say I have this data set. I have two variables. I have GDP and coffee production. And I have two histograms here. And I were to ask you, is there a relationship between countries with higher GDP and higher coffee production? Do countries with higher GDP produce more coffee? Two histograms. We've summarized the two variables separately. Anyone want to take a guess at this? I put you all to sleep. Luke, except Luke.
Can't really tell.
Two histograms, we can't really tell. Yeah, so very similar to last time, yeah. Okay, so you're seeing a correlation here.
Well, I think if we had more data points, it would be easier to tell and actually say with confidence that there is.
Okay.
I mean, just from the two data, if you were to put them on the same graph, I would say that there is.
Okay, so maybe we put them on the same graph and check. And we will talk about correlation and causation at the end of the slides. Yeah, so I would say it's hard to see the relationship from this figure. So let's put the two variables on the same graph. We've already introduced the scatter plot. Let's just use that. Why don't we use a graph like this? So I have a bunch of points, and I've connected them with a line, just like we did with line time series. Why don't we do this? Is this informative? Why is this not informative? Why do we use a line graph with time series, but we don't when we use cross-section? Yeah, Alexis.
This isn't like matching words, but if you're looking at different countries, you're not like, there's no reason for them to connect or they're not related to each other.
That's exactly it. Alexis is saying these observations in cross-section are not connected to each other. It's not the same unit of observation. We have multiple individuals at one point in time, which are unconnected. With a time series, we plot them in with a line graph because it's the same unit of observation through time. It's one entity. Here, these are not the same entities, so we don't plot it with a line. This actually obscures the separation between the individuals. So instead what we do, as Darren is recommending, is plot this as a scatter plot. On the horizontal axis, I have GDP per capita, or just GDP in trillions of dollars. And then on the vertical axis, I have coffee production in billions of kilograms. So now my question back at you. Is there a relationship between coffee production and GDP? I think this is maybe a little bit hard to read. We have a lot of data points that are clumped up around the bottom here. So it's hard to tell if there's if there's a relationship here. We can definitely see that it seems like the further you move out on the horizontal axis, the further you move up on the vertical axis. But before we try to talk about trends like that, or relationships between these two variables. Let's just think systematically about how to read a figure like this. So one question we could ask of the data is, which countries have a GDP above $2 trillion? Take a second. I want you to identify on the graph which countries. This might seem like an easy question. If it is, that's great. Which countries, and maybe how many of them, have a GDP above $2 trillion in our data set? Take 30 seconds, tell your neighbor a number. Okay, someone tell me a number. Sophia. 3. How do we find it? So on the horizontal, how many are to the right of 2? And it's this one, and this one. Okay. So we've identified the countries with the GDP above 2 trillion. What about this one? So we can use this kind of comparison both on the horizontal and the vertical. So let's take a second here, try to answer this question. Which countries have a production above 1/2 billion kilograms? Maybe try to count them up. And maybe the answer is, if you're asking me about 1/2, why haven't you labeled it? Yeah, good question. Okay, so I'm going to say it looks something like this. These two are just slightly below 1/2. Any quibbles? Maybe better horizontal ticks, or vertical, horizontal ticks would be helpful. Agreed. So we can identify values on the horizontal and vertical axis, just as we would expect. We can also make comparisons between points. So just like we used some extra tooling using the 45-degree line, we can do the same thing here. I've identified Brazil, and my question for you is, which countries produce less coffee per dollar of GDP than Brazil? So this is a slightly more complicated type of question. We'll take about a minute here. I want you to try to maybe pinpoint what region of this graph corresponds to the countries that answer this question. Which countries produce less coffee per dollar than Brazil? Okay, how many of you have an answer for me? A few? Okay. Someone want to try to answer this? Someone other than Jason. Someone other than Darren. Okay, Matan, yeah.
So I'm not sure, but I think it's those 4. Here, go down one.
Down here?
That one,
This one?
Go that one, go to the left a little, that one, and that one. Those are the obvious ones.
Okay.
Like,
And then maybe some of these too.
it's hard to tell over there, but
Yeah.
anything where the line from the y-axis to it is longer than the line from the x-axis to it.
Okay, so yeah, looking at the ratios of x-axis to y-axis. Yeah, so Matan is pointing out maybe it's some of these. And then maybe also some of these. Someone follow up on Matan's answer here. How might we think systematically about answering this question? Like what part of the graph? Yeah.
Like if we were to add a line of best fit and then see points fall below it.
Okay, and how would the best fit line be drawn? Like,
Like from 0, 0 up through Brazil.
okay,
To Brazil.
so nice. So remind me of your name?
Ava.
Ava. So Ava's saying we're going to draw a line from 0, 0, the origin, up to Brazil. So a line that runs from here to here. Let's actually just plot that. So we have this line which represents every possible ratio of GDP and production of coffee. Just like we did with the 45-degree line in the previous example, this line represents every ratio of GDP and coffee production that's equal to Brazil. And all we have to do is identify the points that are on one side of this line. Matan and Ava both gave me an answer here. Someone try to articulate which side of this line answers this question. Yeah. So produces less coffee per dollar than Brazil. Or another way of saying this is more dollars for the same amount of coffee. Remind me of your name? Jake. J, I'm sorry. Like the letter J. Yeah, got it. So Jay's saying everything below the line would be more coffee per dollar than Brazil. Any questions here? Nice. We could call these separating lines if we like. We did something similar with a 45-degree line before, but it doesn't have to be 45 degrees. We can set these up really in any way we like. All right. And then we can just do the same thing on the other side. So if we're looking at more coffee per dollar than Brazil, then it would be these countries. So we can make comparisons between ratios. So essentially these lines represent some constant ratio across a bunch of horizontal and vertical values. I'm going to ask you maybe 2 or 3 more questions, and then I'll send you out the door. We're going to work with these things a little bit more in the next, next class. But let's say I were to ask you this question. Do the GDPs of the upper or lower pair differ by a larger amount? So it's a little bit hard to see here. Why are your figures so bad, Taylor? This is Cameroon and Malawi. They're both coffee-producing countries. And then this is Thailand, and this is Brazil. My question for you is the upper pair, does the upper pair or does the larger pair differ by a larger amount? So does Cameroon and Malawi, do they differ in coffee production, in GDP on the horizontal axis, by more or less than Thailand and Brazil? Take maybe like 20 seconds here. Upper pair or larger pair have a larger difference? Just give your neighbor an answer. Okay, is this a simple answer? Someone tell me. Luke.
The difference between Thailand and Brazil with respect to GDP is larger.
Okay, so the difference between Thailand, which is roughly 1.2 maybe, and Brazil, which is like 3.1, that difference is pretty large. Where the difference between Cameroon and Malawi is so small it's impossible to read it on this figure. So we can use the horizontal axis to measure differences. What if I were to ask you this question? Which is larger, the ratio of the GDPs of the upper or lower pair? So we take Brazil's GDP, we divide it by Thailand's GDP, then we take Cameroon's GDP and we divide it by Malawi's GDP. Take a second here. Okay, someone give me an answer. Someone other than Luke. See it, I appreciate it. Yeah, Jason.
It's kind of hard to tell what it's coming from.
Okay, and why is it hard to tell?
Because you don't know what the exact numbers are for Cameroon and
Malawi.
So like, it's just hard to tell like what those two numbers could be because
Yeah.
it could be greater or less than that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell here. I think for two reasons. One of them, Jason is saying, like, it's hard to see what those numbers actually are. And then second, if we were able to see them, we would still have to take a ratio in our heads. And that's kind of challenging to do. Next class, we're going to talk about a way of actually visualizing ratios, which makes it very simple to answer this kind of question. Homework 1.5 is posted, and then homework 1.6 will be posted later tonight. I will see you all in office hours tomorrow.